You know, it's strange how the most mundane moments can become the prelude to something unimaginable. It was a typical Saturday evening, and I was lounging on the couch, mindlessly flipping through channels, waiting for my wife, Karen, to get home. She had mentioned earlier that she was meeting up with some old friends, a reunion of sorts. At least that is what she told me. The hours ticked by, and my curiosity grew. Karen was usually punctual, never one to stay out late without letting me know. Around midnight, I tried calling her, but there was no answer. I shrugged it off, thinking she might be in a noisy place or her phone battery had died. But as the night grew older, a gnawing feeling of unease started creeping in. I decided to go to bed, convincing myself that everything was fine. Maybe I was being paranoid, but sleep was elusive. I tossed and turned, my mind racing with thoughts and questions. What if something had happened to her? What if she was in trouble? Around 2 a.m., I heard the faint sound of the front door creaking open. My heart pounded as I quietly got out of bed and tiptoed to the top of the stairs. There she was, Karen, trying to be as quiet as possible. She looked disheveled. Her hair was a mess, and her clothes were slightly wrinkled. My stomach churned with a mix of relief and suspicion. "Hey, you were home late?" I called out, trying to keep my voice steady. Karen jumped, clearly startled. "Oh, hey, didn't mean to wake you. We just lost track of time," she said, her voice unusually high-pitched. I nodded slowly, not wanting to push the issue right then. "It is fine. Let us talk in the morning." She seemed relieved and quickly headed upstairs. But I couldn't shake off the feeling that something was off. I went back to bed, my mind now plagued with doubts and fears. Was she really with her friends? Or was there something more sinister at play? The next morning, Karen acted as if nothing had happened. She was cheerful, making breakfast and chatting about her night out. But I couldn't bring myself to join in the conversation. My mind was elsewhere, trying to piece together the puzzle. As the day went on, I decided to take matters into my own hands. I knew her phone had a passcode, but I had seen her enter it countless times. When she went for a shower, I seized the opportunity. My hands shook as I unlocked her phone and started scrolling through her messages and call logs. And that S, when I saw it, a string of messages from someone named Mark. My heart sank. The messages were explicit, detailing their plans to meet up, the thrill of sneaking around, and the promise of more to come. I felt a wave of anger and betrayal wash over me. My worst fears had come true. I decided to confront her, but I needed to gather more evidence. Over the next few days, I kept an eye on her, noting the times she would leave the house, the vague excuses she gave, and the secretive phone calls. I even followed her one evening, my heart pounding as I tailed her car to a motel on the outskirts of town. I watched from a distance as she met up with a man, Mark, I presumed. They hugged, kissed, and disappeared into a room together. It felt like a punch to the gut. I wanted to burst in there, confront them, scream, and demand answers, but I held back, knowing I needed to plan my next steps carefully. Returning home, I felt a mix of rage and heartbreak. Karen, the woman I loved, had betrayed me, and I had to decide what to do next. Confront her, expose her, seek revenge. My mind raced with possibilities, each more intense than the last. Little did I know, this was just the beginning of a series of events that would change our lives forever. After the shock of that night at the motel, I spent the next few days in a haze, trying to figure out how to confront Karen about her infidelity. Every time I looked at her, a mix of rage and sadness churned inside me. She went about her daily routine, completely oblivious to the storm brewing within me. Finally, I couldn't take it anymore. One evening, as we sat down for dinner, I decided it was time to confront her. I took a deep breath, trying to steady my shaking hands. "Karen, we need to talk," I said, my voice betraying the turmoil I felt. She looked up from her plate, a hint of concern crossing her face. "Sure, what's on your mind?" I took a moment to collect my thoughts, then plunged ahead. "I know about Mark." The color drained from her face and her fork clattered to her plate. "Whew, what do you mean? Dante play dumb, Karen. I followed you to the motel," I said, my voice rising. "I saw you with him." Her eyes widened and she looked like a deer caught in headlights. For a moment I thought she might deny it, but then her shoulders slumped and she sighed. I'm sorry, she whispered. It just happened. I didn't mean for it to. Didn't mean for it to? I echoed, my voice dripping with sarcasm. You think that makes it okay? You betrayed me, Karen. You lied to me. You slept with another man. Tears welled up in her eyes, but I felt no sympathy. She had brought this on herself. I never wanted to hurt you, she said, her voice breaking. I love you, but Mark and I, we had a connection. I stood up, unable to sit still any longer. A connection, is that what you call it? Sneaking around, lying, cheating? That's not a connection, Karen. That's betrayal. She sobbed, burying her face in her hands. Please just give me a chance to explain. Explain? What is there to explain? You cheated on me and you didn't even have the decency to tell me the truth. How long has this been going on? She looked up, her eyes red and puffy. A few months, she admitted. It started when we reconnected at a party. We never meant for it to go this far. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Months of lies, months of deceit. I felt a burning rage rising inside me. You know what, Karen? I don't care anymore. Pack your things and get out. She stared at me, shock and desperation etched on her face. Please don't do this. We can work through this. We can go to counseling, try to fix things. I shook my head. There's nothing left to fix. You've destroyed our marriage and I can't trust you anymore. Just go. She stood up, her hands trembling as she wiped away her tears. Where am I supposed to go? That's not my problem, I said coldly. You should have thought about that before you decided to cheat on me. As she slowly made her way upstairs to pack, I sat back down at the table, my mind racing. This was it. The end of our marriage. The end of everything we had built together. I felt a strange mix of relief and sorrow, knowing that my life would never be the same again. A few minutes later, Karen came back downstairs, a suitcase in hand. She paused at the door, looking back at me with a pleading expression. Please, just give me a chance to make things right. I met her gaze, my heart hardening. It is too late for that, Karen. Goodbye. She nodded, tears streaming down her face, and walked out the door. As it closed behind her, I felt a heavy weight lift off my shoulders. But the emptiness that replaced it was almost worse. I sat there for a long time, staring at the empty seat across from me, wondering how everything had gone so wrong. That night, I barely slept. My mind was a whirlwind of emotions, anger, sadness, betrayal. I couldn't shake the image of Karen and Mark together, their betrayal cutting deeper than I ever thought possible. The next morning, I woke up determined to move forward. I had to find a way to rebuild my life, to heal from the wounds Karen had inflicted. Little did I know, the path ahead would be far more treacherous than I could ever imagine. The days following Karen S.'s departure were a blur. I tried to keep myself busy, diving into work and hobbies, anything to keep my mind off the betrayal. But no matter what I did, thoughts of Karen and Mark kept creeping back, poisoning my moments of peace. One evening, a week after Karen left, I decided to go through the house and remove all traces of her. It felt therapeutic, like I was taking control of my life again. As I was clearing out the closet, my phone buzzed with a text. It was from an unknown number and my heart skipped a beat. Hey, it's Mark. We need to talk. I stared at the screen, a mixture of anger and curiosity boiling inside me. What could he possibly want? Against my better judgment, I decided to meet him. I needed answers, closure. We met at a small, out-of-the-way cafe. Mark was already there, sitting at a corner table, looking tense. As I approached, he looked up, his expression a mix of guilt and regret. Thanks for meeting me, he said quietly as I sat down. Make it quick, Mark. What do you want? I replied, barely able to contain my anger. He took a deep breath. I just wanted to say I'm sorry. I never meant for any of this to happen. I know that doesn't change anything, but I needed you to hear it from me. You are right. It doesn't change anything, I snapped. You and Karen destroyed my life. Why should I believe anything you say? Mark looked down, fiddling with his coffee cup. I know you have no reason to trust me, but I need you to understand something. Karen and it was a mistake. We were both going through tough times and we leaned on each other. But I regret it, every single day. I shook my head, the anger bubbling up inside me. Regret? You regret it now that it's all out in the open. Where was this regret when you were sneaking around behind my back? I deserve that, he admitted, looking me straight in the eyes. But I am here because I want to make things right, or at least try to. Karen and I are done. She is moving away, starting fresh somewhere else. His words hit me like a ton of bricks. So Karen was leaving town. A part of me felt relieved, but another part of me felt the sting of her final betrayal. She wasn't just leaving me, she was running away from the mess she had created. Good, I said finally. But that doesn't fix the damage you've done. I know, Mark said softly. But I hope you can find it in your heart to move on, to heal. You deserve that. I stood up, feeling a surge of finality. I don't need your advice, Mark. Just stay out of my life. As I walked away, I felt a strange sense of closure. It wasn't a happy ending, but at least it was an ending. And that was something. Back home, I felt a renewed sense of purpose. It was time to truly start over. I decided to focus on the things I had neglected: my health, my friendships, my passions. Slowly but surely, I started to rebuild. But life has a funny way of throwing curveballs when you least expect them. One evening, as I was clearing out the last of Karen S. things, my phone rang. It was a call from an unknown number. I almost ignored it, but something compelled me to answer. Hello? There was a moment of silence. Then a familiar voice spoke. Hi, it's Karen. My heart skipped a beat. What do you want, Karen? I wanted to talk. To explain, she said, her voice shaky. I don't need your explanations, I replied, trying to keep my voice steady. Please just hear me out, she pleaded. I am not asking for forgiveness, but I need you to know the truth. Against my better judgment, I agreed to meet her. We arranged to meet at a park near our old house. As I walked towards her, I couldn't help but notice how different she looked: tired, worn out. It was clear that the past few weeks had taken a toll on her too. Thank you for meeting me, she said softly as I approached. Just get to the point, Karen, I replied, crossing my arms. She took a deep breath, tears welling up in her eyes. I know I have hurt you in ways I can't even begin to understand. I don't expect you to forgive me, but I need you to know that what I had with Mark, it wasn't about love, it was about escape. Escape? I echoed, incredulous. Yes, she said, her voice trembling. I was struggling, feeling trapped in our life. Mark was just a distraction, a way to numb the pain I couldn't face. But it was a mistake, and I see that now. I'm truly sorry. I stared at her, feeling a mix of emotions: anger, sadness, but also a strange sense of understanding. Karen, you had a choice. You chose to betray me instead of talking to me. How can I ever trust you again? She nodded, tears streaming down her face. I know, and I don't expect you to. I just needed you to hear the truth. I am leaving town, starting over. I hope you can find it in your heart to do the same. As she walked away, I felt a strange sense of relief. It wasn't forgiveness, but it was something. A chapter closing, a new one beginning. That night, I went to bed with a sense of hope I hadn't felt in a long time. The road ahead was uncertain, but it was mine to walk. And for the first time in a long time, I felt ready to take the first step. Weeks turned into months, and life slowly began to take on a new rhythm. I poured myself into my work, finding solace in the structured demands of my job. My colleagues, sensing my need for distraction, rallied around me, and I found unexpected support in the most unlikely places. One evening, I was working late, engrossed in a particularly challenging project, when my phone buzzed. I glanced at the screen and saw a message from an unknown number. My heart skipped a beat as I opened it. Hey, it's Karen. Can we meet one last time? I stared at the message, debating whether to respond. Finally, curiosity won out, and I agreed to meet her the next day at a cafe we used to frequent. The next afternoon, I arrived early, my mind racing with questions. Karen walked in a few minutes later, looking different, more serene, almost hopeful. She sat down across from me, and we exchanged awkward pleasantries before diving into the reason for our meeting. I know this might be hard to believe, Karen began, her voice steady, but I've been doing a lot of thinking and soul-searching, I've started therapy, and it's helped me understand a lot about myself and my actions. I know I can undo the past, but I want you to know that I am genuinely sorry for everything." I nodded, unsure of what to say. "I appreciate that, Karen. But why did you want to meet?" She took a deep breath. "There's something else you need to know. Something that might explain a lot of what happened between us." I frowned. My curiosity piqued. "What do you mean?" Karen hesitated, then reached into her bag and pulled out a folded piece of paper. She handed it to me, her hands trembling. "Read this." I unfolded the paper and began to read. It was a letter written in a neat, unfamiliar handwriting. As I read the words, my heart pounded in my chest. "Dear Karen, I know this letter might come as a shock, but I need to tell you the truth. I am your mother. I gave you up for adoption when you were just a baby, and I've spent the last few years trying to find you. I never meant to disrupt your life, but I needed you to know the truth. Please, if you are willing, reach out to me. I would love to meet you and explain everything. With love, Miriam." I looked up at Karen, my mind reeling. "You? You found your biological mother?" Karen nodded, tears in her eyes. "Yes. Just before everything happened with Mark, I got that letter. It threw me into a tailspin. I didn't know how to process it, and I ended up making some terrible decisions. I sat back trying to absorb this new information. Why didn't you tell me?" "I didn't know how," she admitted. "I was scared and confused. I thought maybe I could handle it on my own, but I was wrong, and in the process, I hurt you deeply." We sat in silence for a few moments, the weight of her revelations settling over us. Finally, I found my voice. "Karen, this explains a lot, but it doesn't excuse what you did. You should have trusted me enough to share this with me." "I know," she said quietly, "and I regret that more than anything. I don't expect forgiveness, but I hope you can understand why I was so lost." I nodded slowly. "I do, and I appreciate you telling me, but it doesn't change the fact that our marriage is over." Karen wiped away a tear and nodded. "I understand. I just needed you to know the truth. Thank you for listening." As we parted ways, I felt a strange sense of closure. Karen's revelation had given me a new perspective on our past, but it also reinforced my decision to move on. She had her own journey to make, and so did I. The next few weeks passed in a blur of work and introspection. I focused on rebuilding my life, making new friends, and reconnecting with old ones. Slowly but surely, I started to feel like myself again. One evening, as I was settling into my new routine, my phone rang. It was a call from an old college friend, Mike, whom I hadn't seen in years. We chatted for a while, catching up on each other's lives, and he invited me to a small gathering at his place. I decided to go, eager for a change of scenery and some social interaction. When I arrived at Mike's house, I was greeted by familiar faces and warm smiles. It felt good to be among friends again. As the evening wore on, I found myself talking to a woman named Rachel. She was smart, funny, and we quickly hit it off. We spent the rest of the night chatting and laughing, and by the time I left, I felt a spark of hope for the first time in a long while. Over the next few weeks, Rachel and I started seeing each other more often. We went out for coffee, shared meals, and spent hours talking about everything and nothing. She was a breath of fresh air, and I found myself looking forward to our time together. One night, as we were walking through the park, Rachel turned to me with a serious expression. "Tim, I know you have been through a lot, and I don't want to rush anything, but I really like you, and I think we have something special. What do you think?" I stopped walking and looked at her, feeling a mix of emotions. "Rachel, I like you too, a lot, but I need you to know that I am still healing from my past. I don't want to bring any baggage into this relationship." She smiled, reaching out to take my hand. "We all have baggage, Tim. The important thing is how we deal with it. I'm here for you, and I am willing to take things slow. Let's see where this goes." As we continued walking hand in hand, I felt a sense of peace and hope. The past had left its scars, but the future was full of possibilities. And for the first time in a long time, I was ready to embrace it. Life has a way of surprising you when you least expect it. As Rachel and I grew closer, I found myself healing in ways I never thought possible. The scars from my past began to fade, replaced by new memories and new hopes. One evening, as we sat on my porch watching the sunset, Rachel turned to me and smiled. "You know, Tim, I think this is the beginning of something wonderful." I smiled back, feeling a warmth spread through my chest. "I think so too, Rachel. I think so too." And with that, we sat in comfortable silence, knowing that whatever the future held, we would face it together. Things with Rachel were going well, almost too well. After months of darkness and betrayal, it felt like the sun was finally shining on me again. We continued to see each other regularly, enjoying simple pleasures like walks in the park, dinners at cozy little restaurants, and long, late-night conversations. Her presence was a balm to my wounded heart, and for the first time in a long while, I felt genuinely happy. But as the weeks turned into months, small, unsettling details began to surface. At first, they were easy to dismiss. A curious look from Rachel when I mentioned an old friend. A vague answer when I asked about her past. A mysterious phone call she declined to answer in front of me. I chalked it up to my lingering trust issues, remnants of the betrayal I had endured with Karen. Then one evening, as we were having dinner at my place, Rachel excused herself to take a call. She stepped out onto the porch, and I could see her through the kitchen window. Her expression was tense, her gestures animated. The call lasted only a few minutes, but when she came back inside, she seemed flustered. "Everything okay?" I asked, trying to keep my tone light. She forced a smile. "Yeah, just work stuff. Nothing to worry about." I nodded, but the seed of doubt was already planted. That night, as we lay in bed, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. I resolved to give her the benefit of the doubt, but my instincts wouldn't let it go. A few days later, while Rachel was at work, I decided to dig a little deeper. I hated myself for doing it, but I needed to know if my fears were justified. I searched her name online, hoping to find some innocuous information that would put my mind at ease. Instead, what I found only fueled my suspicions. Rachel had a history. There were mentions of her in old news articles and social media post details she had never shared with me. Most alarming was a post from a few years back, hinting at a relationship gone wrong and accusations of dishonesty. My heart sank. Had I traded one betrayal for another? That evening, when Rachel came over, I tried to act normal, but it was difficult to hide my anxiety. We had dinner and watched a movie, but my mind was elsewhere, wrestling with the decision of whether to confront her. After the movie ended, I couldn't hold back any longer. "Rachel, there's something I need to ask you." She turned to me, her eyes widening slightly. "What is it, Tim?" I took a deep breath. "I found some things online about your past. Some things you never told me. Can you explain?" Her expression shifted from surprise to something darker. "What exactly did you find? Articles? Posts? They mention a relationship you had and accusations of dishonesty. Why didn't you tell me about this?" Rachel sighed, looking away. "I was hoping it wouldn't come up. Yes, I had a rough patch a few years ago. I was in a bad relationship and things got messy. But I didn't lie to you, Tim. I just didn't want to dredge up the past. I wanted to believe her. God, I wanted to." But the shadow of Karen S. betrayal loomed large in my mind. "Why didn't you think I needed to know? We've been seeing each other for months, Rachel. Trust is important to me." She reached for my hand, her eyes pleading. "I know, and I'm sorry. I didn't want to burden you with my past. I care about you, Tim, and I thought I could leave that part of my life behind." I pulled my hand away, my heart heavy with doubt. "But you didn't leave it behind, did you? You brought it into our relationship by not being honest with me." Rachel's eyes filled with tears. "Tim, please, you have to understand. I didn't want to hurt you. I thought I was protecting us." I stood up, unable to sit still any longer. "Protecting us? Or protecting yourself? I can go through this again, Rachel. I can deal with more lies." She stood up too, reaching out to me. "Please, Tim, give me a chance to explain. We can work through this." I shook my head, the pain of betrayal cutting deep. "I need some time to think. I need to be alone." Rachel nodded, tears streaming down her face. "I understand. I am so sorry, Tim. I'll give you the space you need." As she left, I felt a crushing sense of déjà vu. Once again, I was left alone, grappling with the remnants of a broken relationship. The weight of it all pressed down on me, and I wondered if I would ever find someone I could truly trust. The following days were a blur of work and solitude. I avoided Rachel's calls and texts, needing time to process everything. My mind was a battlefield, torn between the desire to believe in her and the fear of being hurt again. One evening, as I sat alone in my living room, my phone buzzed with a call from an unknown number. Reluctantly, I answered it. Hello? There was a brief pause, then a familiar voice spoke. Tim, it's Karen. My heart skipped a beat. Karen, why are you calling? I know this is unexpected, but I heard about what has been happening with Rachel. I wanted to see if you were okay. I was stunned. How do you know about Rachel? I ran into her a few days ago, Karen admitted. She was upset and mentioned your name. We got to talking and she told me everything. Tim, I know I have no right to say this, but I think she's genuine. I think she really cares about you. I was silent, processing her words. Why are you telling me this? Because I know what it's like to make mistakes, Karen said softly. And I know what it is like to lose someone you care about because of those mistakes. I don't want that to happen to you again. Her words struck a chord, and for the first time I felt a glimmer of hope. Thank you, Karen. You're welcome. And Tim, if you ever need to talk, I'm here. As I hung up, I felt a strange mix of emotions, gratitude, confusion, and a renewed sense of hope. Maybe Karen was right. Maybe Rachel deserved another chance. That night I called Rachel. She answered on the first ring, her voice filled with relief. Tim? Rachel, can we talk? I think we both deserve another chance to get this right. Her voice wavered with emotion. Yes, Tim. I would like that very much. As we made plans to meet the next day, I felt a weight lift off my shoulders. The road ahead was uncertain, but for the first time in a long time, I felt ready to face it with an open heart. And maybe, just maybe, this time things would be different. The next day, Rachel and I met at a quiet cafe downtown, the same place where we had shared so many happy moments before things started to unravel. She looked nervous as she walked in, her eyes scanning the room until they found me. I stood up to greet her, feeling a mix of anxiety and hope. Hi, she said softly, a tentative smile on her lips. Hi, I replied, trying to convey warmth and openness despite my lingering doubts. We sat down, and for a few moments neither of us spoke. The silence between us was heavy with unspoken words and unresolved feelings. Finally, Rachel broke the silence. Tim, I just want to start by saying how sorry I am for not being completely honest with you. I should have told you about my past from the beginning. I was scared, but that is no excuse. I nodded, appreciating her candor. Thank you for saying that, Rachel. I know it must have been hard for you, but trust is crucial for me, especially after everything I've been through. I understand, she said, her eyes filled with sincerity. I want to rebuild that trust, Tim. If you'll let me, I want to be completely open with you from now on. No more secrets. I took a deep breath, considering her words. I want to believe you, Rachel, and I want to give us a chance to start over. But we need to take things slow and work through this together. She reached across the table, taking my hand in hers. I promised him. I'll do whatever it takes to make this right. We spent the next few hours talking openly about our pasts, our fears, and our hopes for the future. It was a difficult conversation, but it was also cathartic. For the first time, I felt like we were truly connecting on a deeper level. As the weeks went by, Rachel and I focused on rebuilding our relationship. We attended couples therapy, which helped us communicate more effectively and understand each other's perspectives. I also continued my individual therapy, working through my trust issues and learning to let go of the past. One evening, after a particularly enlightening therapy session, Rachel and I took a walk in the park. The sun was setting, casting a warm, golden glow over everything. It felt like a fresh start, a new beginning. Tim, I want to thank you for giving me another chance, Rachel said, squeezing my hand. I know it hasn't been easy, but I am so grateful for your patience and understanding. I smiled, feeling a genuine sense of happiness. I'm glad we decided to work through this together, Rachel. I believe in us. As we walked, I realized that our relationship had grown stronger through adversity. We had faced our fears and insecurities head on, and we were better for it. For the first time in a long time, I felt a sense of peace and contentment. But life has a way of testing you when you least expect it. A few months later, Rachel and I were at a friend S party when I noticed a familiar face in the crowd. It was Mark. My heart raced as I saw him talking to a group of people, seemingly oblivious to my presence. All the old feelings of anger and betrayal came rushing back, and I felt a knot of tension in my stomach. Rachel noticed my discomfort and followed my gaze. When she saw Mark, her expression hardened. "Do you want to leave?" she asked gently. I shook my head, taking a deep breath. "No, I'm not going to let him ruin our night. Let's stay." As the evening went on, I tried to avoid Mark, but eventually our paths crossed. He looked surprised to see me and even more surprised to see me with Rachel. "Tim," he said awkwardly, "I didn't expect to see you here." "Neither did I replied coolly. Rachel stepped forward, her expression firm. "Mark, we don't need to make a scene. Tim and I are here to enjoy ourselves, and that is what we're going to do." Mark nodded, looking chastened. "I understand. I'm sorry if my presence is making things uncomfortable. I'll keep my distance." I appreciated Rachel's support and felt a sense of pride in how we handled the situation. It was a small victory, but it felt significant. The next day, as we relaxed at home, I reflected on how far we had come. The road to redemption had been challenging, but it had also brought us closer together. I felt a renewed sense of hope for the future. "Rachel," I said, taking her hand, "I want you to know how much I appreciate everything you have done to make things right. I love you, and I'm committed to building a future with you." Tears welled up in her eyes as she smiled. "I love you too, Tim, and I am committed to our future as well." As we embraced, I knew that our journey was far from over, but we were stronger together. We had faced our demons, and we had come out on the other side, ready to embrace whatever the future held, and for the first time in a long time, I felt truly at peace. Rachel and I continued to rebuild our relationship, finding strength in each other as we navigated the complexities of our pasts and looked forward to a future together. We settled into a comfortable routine, balancing our work and personal lives, and making time for each other in meaningful ways. It felt like we were finally on solid ground. One Saturday morning, as we enjoyed a leisurely breakfast, there was a knock at the door. I frowned, not expecting anyone. "I'll get it," I said, rising from the table. Opening the door, I was greeted by a woman who looked vaguely familiar. She was in her mid-50s, with kind eyes and a warm smile. "Hello, Tim," she said softly. "Hi," I replied, puzzled. "Do I know you?" She smiled. "I am Miriam, Karen S. mother." My heart skipped a beat. Miriam. The woman Karen had discovered was her biological mother. I hadn't expected to ever meet her, especially not like this. "Oh, please come in," I said, stepping aside to let her in. Rachel looked up from the table, surprise evident on her face. "Who's this?" she asked. "This is Miriam, Karen S. biological mother," I explained, watching as Rachel S. expression shifted from surprise to curiosity. "It's nice to meet you, Miriam," Rachel said, standing up and extending her hand. "I am Rachel." Miriam shook her hand, smiling warmly. "Nice to meet you too, Rachel. I am sorry for showing up unannounced, but I needed to talk to Tim." I gestured for her to sit down. "Of course." "What brings you here, Miriam?" She took a seat and clasped her hands in her lap, her expression turning serious. "I know this might be unexpected, but Karen has been struggling. She's been trying to start over, but she's finding it difficult. She asked me to reach out to you." I felt a mix of emotions: concern for Karen, curiosity about what Miriam had to say, and a hint of dread. "What does she want?" I asked carefully. Miriam sighed. "She wants closure. She has been going through therapy and making progress, but she feels like she needs to make amends with you to truly move on. She asked if you would be willing to meet with her, just once, to talk." I glanced at Rachel, who gave me an encouraging nod. "It's up to you, Tim," she said softly. "If you think it will help, you should do it." I turned back to Miriam. "Okay, I'll meet with her. When and where?" Miriam's face lit up with relief. "Thank you, Tim. I'll let her know. How about tomorrow afternoon at the park?" "That works," I agreed. As Miriam left, I felt a mixture of apprehension and determination. This meeting could be the final step in closing that chapter of my life. The next afternoon, I arrived at the park a bit early, my mind racing with thoughts of what Karen might say. I found a bench near the lake and sat down, watching the ducks glide across the water. A few minutes later, Karen arrived, looking nervous but determined. "Hi, Tim," she said, sitting down beside me. "Hi, Karen," I replied, studying her. She looked different, more mature, more introspective. Therapy had clearly had an impact on her. "Thank you for agreeing to meet," she began. "I know this isn't easy for either of us." I nodded. "It is okay. I think we both need this." She took a deep breath. "I want to start by saying how sorry I am for everything. I know I hurt you deeply, and I take full responsibility for my actions. I've been working through my issues in therapy, and I have learned a lot about myself. I needed to face you and apologize in person." Her sincerity touched me. "I appreciate that, Karen. It wasn't just about the affair. It was about the lies, the betrayal of trust. But I can see that you are genuinely trying to make amends." She nodded, tears in her eyes. "I am. I know I can't undo the past, but I want to make things right. If there's anything I can do to help you heal, please let me know." I thought for a moment, then spoke from the heart. "I think hearing your apology helps. It gives me some closure. But I also want you to forgive yourself and move forward. We both need to move on from this." She nodded, wiping away a tear. "Thank you, Tim. That means a lot." We sat in silence for a few moments, the weight of the past slowly lifting. Finally, Karen spoke again. "I am moving to a new city, starting a new job. I think it's the fresh start I need. I hope you and Rachel find happiness together." I smiled. "I wish you all the best, Karen. I hope you find peace and happiness too." As we parted ways, I felt a sense of closure and relief. The chapter with Karen was finally, truly over. I walked back to my car, feeling lighter than I had in a long time. When I returned home, Rachel was waiting for me. "How did it go?" she asked, her eyes filled with concern. "It went well," I said, smiling. "We talked, and she apologized. I feel like we both got the closure we needed." Rachel hugged me tightly. "I am so proud of you, Tim. You have come so far." I held her close, feeling a deep sense of gratitude. "I couldn't have done it without you, Rachel. Thank you for being there for me." As we stood there, wrapped in each other's arms, I knew that the future was bright. We had faced our pasts, healed our wounds, and emerged stronger, and together, we were ready to embrace whatever life had in store for us. With Karen's chapter finally closed, life seemed to settle into a harmonious rhythm. Rachel and I continued to strengthen our relationship, and the trust we had built through open communication and mutual support became the foundation of our bond. We began to talk about the future, our dreams, our goals, and what we wanted to achieve together. One sunny Saturday, Rachel and I decided to take a day trip to a quaint little town a couple of hours away. It was known for its charming streets, artisan shops, and beautiful hiking trails. As we walked hand in hand through the cobblestone streets, I felt an overwhelming sense of peace and contentment. "Tim, look at this," Rachel said, pulling me towards a small antique store. The window display was filled with an eclectic mix of vintage items, from old cameras to ornate jewelry. We wandered inside, exploring the treasures that filled the shelves. Rachel's eyes sparkled with excitement as she picked up a delicate antique locket. "Isn't this beautiful?" "It is," I agreed, watching her with a smile. "Do you want it?" She shook her head, placing it back gently. "No, it's just nice to look at. I love places like this. They were filled with stories." I nodded, appreciating her sentiment. "Yeah, they are." After spending some time in the town, we headed to a nearby hiking trail. The path wound through lush forests and offered breathtaking views of the surrounding mountains. As we hiked, we talked about our plans and dreams. "You know," Rachel said, pausing to catch her breath at a scenic overlook, "I've been thinking a lot about what we want for the future. I feel like we're ready to take the next step." I turned to her, intrigued. "What do you mean?" She smiled, her eyes filled with warmth. "I mean, maybe it's time we think about moving in together. I love our time together, and I want to build a home with you." Her words filled me with joy. I feel the same way, Rachel. I want to wake up next to you every day to share a life together. We embraced, the stunning view serving as the perfect backdrop to our conversation. It felt like a turning point, a new beginning for us. A few weeks later, we found a charming apartment in a vibrant part of town. It had everything we wanted: a cozy living room, a spacious kitchen for our shared love of cooking, and a small balcony with a view of the city. Moving in together was an exciting and emotional experience, and it marked the start of a new chapter in our relationship. One evening, as we were unpacking boxes and setting up our new home, I stumbled upon an old photo album. It was filled with pictures from my past memories of happier times with friends and family. "What is this?" Rachel asked, sitting down beside me and peering at the album. "It's a photo album from a long time ago," I said, flipping through the pages. "Before everything with Karen happened." She rested her head on my shoulder, looking at the pictures with me. "You had some good times." "I did," I agreed, feeling a mix of nostalgia and gratitude. "But I'm ready to make new memories with you." Rachel smiled and kissed my cheek. "Me too, Tim. Let's fill our life with beautiful moments." As we continued to set up our apartment, we talked about our future plans, traveling to new places, pursuing our passions, and building a life together. We were excited about the journey ahead and the possibilities it held. One Saturday, a few months after moving in, we decided to host a housewarming party. We invited our closest friends and family to celebrate our new beginning. The apartment was filled with laughter, music, and the smell of delicious food. "Welcome, everyone," Rachel announced, raising her glass. "Thank you for joining us to celebrate our new home. Tim and I are so grateful for your love and support." I raised my glass as well, feeling a surge of happiness. Here's to new beginnings and the wonderful journey ahead. The party was a success, filled with joy and warmth. As the evening wound down and our guests started to leave, Rachel and I sat on the balcony, watching the city lights twinkle below. "This feels perfect," Rachel said, resting her head on my shoulder. "I can't imagine being anywhere else." "Me neither," I agreed, wrapping my arm around her. "I am so grateful for everything we've built together." Rachel looked up at me, her eyes shining. "Tim, there's something I have been meaning to ask you." "What is it?" I asked, curious. She took a deep breath, then reached into her pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. "I know this might be unexpected, but will you marry me?" I stared at her in shock, my heart pounding. Rachel's face was filled with love and hope, and I felt tears of joy welling up in my eyes. "Yes, Rachel," I said, my voice filled with emotion. "Yes, I will marry you." She slipped the ring onto my finger, and we embraced, tears of happiness streaming down our faces. In that moment, I knew that our pasts had led us to this perfect present, and our future together was bright and full of promise. As we sat on the balcony, wrapped in each other's arms, I felt an overwhelming sense of peace and fulfillment. We had faced our challenges, overcome our fears, and emerged stronger and more united. Together, we were ready to embrace the future and all the beautiful moments it held. And so, our journey continued, filled with love, laughter, and endless possibilities. The weeks following our engagement were a whirlwind of excitement and planning. Rachel and I dove into preparations for our wedding, eager to celebrate our love with friends and family. Every detail, from the venue to the flowers, was carefully considered, and it felt like everything was falling perfectly into place. One afternoon, as we were finalizing our guest list, Rachel's phone buzzed. She glanced at the screen and frowned. "It's my brother David. He never calls during the day. I should take this." I nodded, watching as she stepped into the other room to answer. A few minutes later, she returned, looking pale and distressed. "What's wrong?" I asked, standing up to meet her. "It is my mom," she said, her voice trembling. "She's in the hospital. She had a heart attack." My heart sank. Rachel's relationship with her mother, Lila, had always been close, and the news was a heavy blow. "I'm so sorry, Rachel. Do you want to go see her?" She nodded, tears in her eyes. "Yes, I need to be there. Will you come with me?" "Of course," I said, wrapping my arms around her. "We'll get through this together." We quickly packed a bag and drove to the hospital, our hearts heavy with worry. When we arrived, Rachel's brother, David, was already there, looking equally anxious. "How is she?" Rachel asked as we hurried into the waiting room. David shook his head, his expression grim. "The doctors are still with her. They said it was a serious heart attack, but they're doing everything they can." Rachel's eyes filled with tears as she sat down, and I held her hand tightly, offering what comfort I could. The next few hours were agonizing, filled with waiting and uncertainty. Finally, a doctor approached us, his expression somber but reassuring. "Your mother is stable," he said, addressing Rachel and David. "She is in the ICU and will need to stay here for a while, but she is responding to treatment." Rachel let out a sigh of relief, and we all thanked the doctor profusely. When we were allowed to see Lila, Rachel and David went in first, while I waited outside, giving them some privacy. When Rachel returned, she looked more composed, though still visibly shaken. "She is awake and talking. She is going to be okay," she said, a small smile breaking through her worry. "That's great news," I said, hugging her tightly. "We'll take it one step at a time." Over the next few days, we spent most of our time at the hospital, supporting Rachel's mother and helping her through the recovery process. The wedding planning took a back seat as we focused on what truly mattered: family and health. One evening, as we sat by Lila's bedside, she reached out to take Rachel's hand. "You should focus on your wedding," she said weakly. "Don't let this stop you." Rachel shook her head, tears in her eyes. "Mom, you are more important. We'll plan the wedding when you are better." Lila smiled softly. "I appreciate that, but I want to see you happy. Promise me you want to let this delay your plans." Rachel nodded, her voice choked with emotion. "I promise, Mom." As Lila's condition improved, we slowly resumed our wedding preparations. It was a delicate balance, ensuring we were there for her while also planning our future. But the experience brought Rachel and me even closer, solidifying our commitment to each other. One afternoon, while we were visiting Lila, she looked at me with a serious expression. "Tim, I want you to take care of my daughter. She's been through so much, and she deserves all the happiness in the world." "I promise," I said, feeling the weight of her words. "I'll do everything I can to make her happy." Lila smiled, a hint of mischief in her eyes. "Good, and don't forget to bring me a slice of that wedding cake." We all laughed, the tension easing slightly. As we left the hospital that evening, Rachel turned to me, her eyes filled with gratitude. "Thank you for being here for me, Tim. I couldn't have done this without you." "I'm always here for you, Rachel," I said, kissing her forehead. "We are a team." With Lila's condition steadily improving, we threw ourselves back into wedding planning with renewed vigor. It felt like a joyous distraction from the challenges we had faced, and every detail brought us closer to our dream day. One evening, as we were finalizing the seating chart, Rachel looked up at me with a thoughtful expression. "Tim, I've been thinking, what if we had the wedding sooner? A small, intimate ceremony, just close friends and family?" I considered her words, feeling a warm surge of love. "I think that's a wonderful idea. We could have a bigger celebration later, but this way, we can share our special day with the people who matter most." Rachel smiled, looking relieved. "I am so glad you think so. Let us do it." We quickly made the necessary arrangements, and within a few weeks everything was set for our intimate ceremony. The day arrived, and it was perfect in every way. The venue was a beautiful garden, filled with blooming flowers and soft sunlight. Our closest friends and family gathered to celebrate our love, and the atmosphere was filled with warmth and joy. As I stood at the altar waiting for Rachel, I felt a surge of emotion. This was it, the moment I had been waiting for, the culmination of all our challenges and triumphs. When Rachel appeared, walking down the aisle with her brother by her side, she took my breath away. She looked radiant, her eyes shining with love and happiness. As she reached the altar, we exchanged a look that spoke volumes. We had made it through so much together, and this was our reward. The ceremony was beautiful, filled with heartfelt vows and promises of a future filled with love and support. As we exchanged rings, I felt an overwhelming sense of gratitude for Rachel and the journey we had shared. "I now pronounce you husband and wife," the officiant said, smiling warmly. "You may kiss the bride." I leaned in and kissed Rachel, feeling a rush of love and joy. The cheers and applause of our loved ones filled the air, and in that moment, everything felt perfect. The reception was a simple yet elegant affair, with delicious food, heartfelt toasts, and plenty of laughter. Lila, though still recovering, was there to share in our joy, her presence a testament to the strength of family and love. As the evening drew to a close, Rachel and I found a quiet moment to ourselves, sitting on a bench under a canopy of stars. "We did it," she said, her eyes shining with happiness. "Yes, we did," I replied, holding her close. "And this is just the beginning. Our future is bright, Rachel. I can wait to see what it holds." As we sat there, wrapped in each other's arms, I felt an overwhelming sense of peace and contentment. We had faced our challenges, overcome our fears, and emerged stronger and more united. And together, we were ready to embrace whatever the future had in store for us. The journey was far from over, but with Rachel by my side, I knew that anything was possible. Our love had been tested and had emerged victorious. And now, as we embarked on this new chapter of our lives, I felt a sense of hope and excitement for the adventures that awaited us.